Dallas, a peaceful neighborhood nestled along tree-lined streets, was a place where small connections held great meaning. Here, people knew each other, exchanged smiles, and greeted one another with warm words. Yet, amidst the seemingly repetitive rhythm of daily life, something magical unfolded. A simple, unexpected bond between Shaquille O'Neal, a towering man with a kind heart, and Mia, a little girl who waited by her window every morning to wave hello. Shaq, 48, had stepped away from the dazzling spotlight of the NBA to embrace a quieter life, but his days were still filled with passion and purpose. Every morning, as he drove his large truck through the neighborhood on his way to the gym, he'd spot Mia standing by her window. With sparkling eyes and a smile as bright as the morning sun, the young girl waved enthusiastically. And, as if by instinct, Shaq would always smile back, return the wave, and sometimes honk his horn, just to see her smile grow even brighter. This connection didn't need words. It was as simple as Mia's gleeful gaze and Shaq's friendly wave. Yet, every time it happened, Shaq felt a lightness in his heart, as if the burdens of life momentarily melted away. In those seemingly insignificant moments, Shaq realized that small gestures could hold immense power. That little girl, he often thought to himself, has brought so much joy to someone like me, a man who thought he'd seen it all. Still, Shaq didn't know much about Mia beyond the fact that she greeted him with the same unwavering energy every morning. He never asked for her name or wondered about her circumstances. Everything felt just right in its simplicity. And perhaps that was why he felt so connected to this small neighborhood, a place where he found not only peace but also a profound emotional bond. Every time he drove by, Shaq couldn't resist glancing at Mia's window. His own gaze, filled with anticipation, always sought out her cheerful wave. But in the midst of these simple joys, who could have imagined that just one different day would change everything forever? That morning, Dallas was draped in a light mist, and the cool air gently embraced the neighborhood like a quiet greeting of a new day. Shaq, as usual, sat behind the wheel, enjoying soft music while his eyes casually scanned the familiar scenery. But as his truck slowly rolled down the small street, a strange heaviness settled in his chest. Mia's window was empty today. The small figure of the little girl was nowhere to be seen. Her eager gaze and tiny hand waving enthusiastically were absent. The curtains were drawn, and not a single ray of light seeped through. Shaq frowned, a chill running down his spine like a cold wave of unease. Maybe she's just sick, he tried to reassure himself, but the words felt hollow. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. Deep inside, an unfamiliar feeling began to grow, a mix of worry and fear, but more than anything, a persistent urge he couldn't ignore. The morning dragged on, but Shaq's mind kept drifting back to that empty window. The image of Mia was now clearer than ever. Her sparkling eyes, her radiant smile that never faltered. Her absence felt like a missing puzzle piece in his daily life, leaving an unsettling void. Throughout the day, Shaq tried to stay busy, but the uneasy feeling wouldn't let him go. Every quiet moment brought him back to the same thought. What if she really needs help? What if I ignore this gut feeling and regret it later? The thought burrowed deeper, growing stronger with each passing hour until it became a decision he couldn't delay any longer. By the end of the day, as the sunlight faded into soft amber tones, Shaq knew he had no other choice. He drove back to the small street, this time not to wave hello, but to find answers to the growing worry in his heart. His pulse quickened, not out of fear, but from a powerful sense of responsibility that pushed him forward. Standing before the silent house, Shaq stepped out of his truck slowly. His gaze turned to the familiar window, silently hoping for a miracle. For Mia to suddenly appear, leaning out and shouting, "I'm here, Mr. Shaq." But the house responded only with a cold, deafening silence. Taking a deep breath, Shaq approached the front door and knocked firmly. No sound came from within, no footsteps, no reply. The weight of the stillness around him felt like a message that something was undeniably wrong. Shaq's heart tightened, and in that moment, he knew he couldn't turn away. She needs me, he thought to himself. And with that unshakable feeling, Shaq found himself on the brink of a journey he never expected. A journey to change the life of a little girl, and, perhaps, his own. Shaq knocked again, harder this time, the sound echoing through the heavy stillness. No response, no sign of life. He stepped back, his worried eyes scanning the house. That growing sense of dread, like an invisible hand squeezing his chest, became impossible to ignore. He moved around the side of the house, his steps heavy with fear that seemed to build with every breath. When he peered through the side window, the darkness inside seemed impenetrable, an eerie void. Everything was unnervingly quiet, until suddenly he heard it. A faint noise. Weak. Indistinct. It sounded like shallow breathing or a soft, painful whimper. Shaq's heart skipped a beat. He hurried to the side door, his hand gripping the handle. To his surprise, it was unlocked. For a brief moment, he hesitated, but then he pushed the door open. "Mia, it's me, Shaq. Are you okay?" His voice echoed through the empty house, unanswered, met only by the oppressive weight of silence. Shaq stepped inside, each footfall feeling as though he was treading on air thick with tension. The house was cold. Its bare walls seemed to tell a story of sadness he had never imagined. Guided by the faint sound he had heard, Shaq made his way down the narrow hallway, his heart pounding in his chest like a warning bell. At the end of the hallway, he stopped before a partially ajar door. From within, a weak ray of light spilled through the crack. Shaq pushed the door open slowly, and what he saw stopped him cold. Mia lay curled up on the floor, her face pale, her breathing shallow and labored. Her half-closed eyes seemed drained of all vitality, as though every ounce of energy had been stolen from her small frame. A faint whimper escaped her cracked lips, so soft that Shaq had to lean in to hear it. "Mia!" he exclaimed, dropping to his knees. His strong arms, trembling yet gentle, lifted her fragile body. Worry and heartbreak filled his eyes. "Mia, listen to me. You're going to be okay. I'm here now," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. The little girl's eyes fluttered open just enough to meet his gaze. Her frail look sent a single tear rolling down Shaq's cheek. "You'll be all right," he murmured, his voice thick with determination, making a promise he was determined to keep. Wasting no time, Shaq scooped Mia into his arms, her weight shockingly light, as if her strength had vanished completely. He raced back to his truck, his steps hurried yet steady, his heart focused on one singular goal: saving this little girl who had become such a meaningful part of his everyday life. On the drive to the hospital, Shaq gripped the wheel with laser focus, glancing repeatedly at Mia. Her eyes remained closed, her breath shallow, like a candle flickering in the wind. "Hold on, Mia. We're almost there," he said, his voice firm yet tender, as if trying to infuse her with his own strength and hope. For a man as strong as Shaq, he had never felt so small and powerless. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. This time, he wouldn't let fate take away a light so precious from his life. The emergency room doors slammed shut behind him, leaving Shaq standing there, frozen in the stark whiteness of the hospital corridor. The hurried steps of nurses and the steady beep of monitors echoed from inside, amplifying the heaviness in his chest. He wanted to do more, to somehow intervene, but all he could do now was wait, a waiting so agonizing it was unlike anything he had ever known. Shaq sank into a chair in the hallway, burying his face in his large hands. His mind spun with unanswered questions. Why does an innocent, joyful child like Mia have to go through this? Did I miss a sign? Could I have done more? The thoughts pierced through him like 100 needles, pricking even his usually unshakable resolve. Hours passed, each moment dragging on endlessly. Finally, the door to the emergency room opened, and a young doctor emerged, her face weary but her eyes kind. "She'll be all right," she said. Those words lifted the immense weight from Shaq's chest. He exhaled deeply, tears welling in his eyes, but the relief was fleeting. The doctor continued, "Mia is severely malnourished and dehydrated. This isn't something that happened overnight. She's been living in a state of neglect and deprivation for a long time." The revelation hit Shaq like a punch to the gut. The image of Mia, always smiling and waving at him, flashed in his mind with a new, heartbreaking perspective. Her daily gestures weren't just cheerful. They were a quiet plea for connection, a search for warmth in a world that had left her so alone. Shaq felt like he'd been punched in the chest. The image of Mia, always standing by the window, waving with a radiant smile, now took on an entirely different meaning in his mind. It wasn't just a simple, innocent gesture. It was a silent cry for connection, a search for a bit of warmth from the outside world, from him. "And her mother?" Shaq asked, his voice trembling slightly. The doctor shook her head, her expression heavy with sadness. "We've contacted social services. From what we've learned, Mia's mother struggles with severe substance abuse and is unable to care for her. Mia has been living in deprivation, both physically and emotionally." The doctor's words tore through Shaq's heart. He couldn't fathom how such a small, joyful child, who brought happiness to others, had endured such a lonely and painful life. He thought of all those mornings when Mia waved at him, her eyes shining like the sun. Those moments, he realized, might have been the rare instances when she felt truly seen, truly connected. "What happens now?" Shaq asked, his voice firm, carrying an unshakable resolve. "She's going to get the care she needs, right?" The doctor placed a compassionate hand on his shoulder, her eyes understanding. "Mia needs someone by her side, not just in the hospital but beyond. We'll do everything we can to ensure she's placed in a better environment." Shaq nodded, but within him, a deeper resolve was forming. He knew he couldn't stop at saving Mia just for today. He needed to do more. A part of him felt an undeniable responsibility toward her, not only because his instincts had brought him to her, but because of the unexplainable bond between them, as though fate had woven their lives together. He stepped into Mia's hospital room, where she lay small and fragile, her arm attached to an IV. Her eyes fluttered open slightly as he approached, and a faint smile crossed her lips. "Mr. Shaq." Her voice was weak, but it carried an undeniable sense of trust and faith. Shaq pulled a chair up beside her bed, gently taking her small hand in his. "I'm here, Mia. I'm not going anywhere." And as he said those words, a promise was etched into his heart, that Mia would never again feel abandoned or alone. Shaq didn't know what the future held, but he was certain of one thing. Mia would never have to face the world by herself again. In the days that followed, Shaq became more than just a visitor. He became a beacon of hope in Mia's life, a source of gentle but steadfast encouragement. Every morning, he arrived at the hospital with stuffed animals, colorful picture books, and snacks for when she was strong enough to eat again. During quiet moments at her bedside, he shared stories about his life, tales of intense basketball games and the lessons he'd learned from life's challenges. Mia listened intently, her eyes gradually regaining their spark, and small smiles began to reappear on her lips. Though her body remained frail, her gaze now carried gratitude and hope, a light that Shaq tirelessly nurtured. Still, he knew he couldn't just focus on the present. In conversations with social workers, Shaq learned that Mia's mother was unable to care for her. It was a heartbreaking reality, but it only strengthened Shaq's determination. He took the time to research and eventually found a loving family to adopt Mia, a kind-hearted couple who adored children and were ready to welcome her into their lives. The day Mia left the hospital for her new home, Shaq stood waiting for her in the hallway. She walked toward him, her tiny steps filled with a quiet strength. When she saw him, a radiant smile lit up her face, the same smile that had brightened his mornings so many times before. Mia threw her arms around Shaq, her soft voice filled with emotion as she said, Thank you for not giving up on me. Shaq knelt down, wrapping his strong but gentle arms around her. You don't need to thank me, Mia. I just did what my heart told me to do. And no matter where you are, remember, you will never be alone. Mia's life began to transform. In her new home, she was surrounded by love and care, and she started to explore the world with a renewed sense of wonder. She made new friends, joined a local basketball team, a sport she had grown to love from the stories Shaq had shared, and embraced her new beginning. Every time Shaq visited, her laughter echoed through the house, filling him with pride, as if he'd just scored a winning point in a crucial game. To Mia, Shaq wasn't just a hero. He was living proof that even small actions, a wave, a gut feeling, or a timely act of kindness can change a life forever. Standing by the basketball court where Mia played with her friends, Shaq smiled contentedly. His heart, once heavy with worry, now overflowed with joy as he watched her thrive and find happiness. We don't need to do grand things to be heroes. Sometimes, simply listening to the call of our hearts and taking small but meaningful actions can create profound change. What will you do when your instincts speak to you? Share your story with us, and don't forget to hit subscribe to help spread positivity and hope.